During peak gusts, Harold Grant stepped outside to check on his generator and was lifted off his feet by hurricane winds. He landed 30 feet away in a muddy ditch, stunned but alive. "It felt like a hand just picked me up and dropped me," he said. He suffered bruises and a fractured wrist, but managed to crawl back inside his home before the next wave of wind hit. Emergency crews later found trees snapped like twigs in his yard. "I'll never take wind warnings lightly again," Grant said from his hospital bed, smiling weakly. A man's entire roof was torn off in a single gust. But what stunned neighbors most was that it landed upright, perfectly intact, 2 houses down. "It was like a hat blown off someone's head," one witness said. No one was hurt, though the home is now considered structurally unsafe. Insurance adjusters called it an extremely rare wind pattern event. The homeowner joked, "If anyone needs a roof, I've got a spare." After the hurricane and widespread flooding along the southern coast, rescue teams found 17-year-old Lucas Reyes floating alone through a submerged neighborhood, clinging to the door of a refrigerator. His family's trailer had been swept away overnight. Using jumper cables, Reyes tied himself to the door and drifted for 16 hours through dark, debris-filled waters. "I just kept thinking I had to stay awake," he told medics. Cold, dehydrated, and covered in cuts, he was taken to a local hospital and is expected to recover fully. Emergency officials called his survival remarkable and credited his quick thinking under pressure. Moments before a violent gust lifted their camper off the ground, 9-year-old Tyler was yanked out by his older sister, who heard the structure creaking. "I don't know why, but I just grabbed him and ran," she said. Seconds later, the wind tossed the camper 50 feet across a field, smashing it into trees. The family had ignored evacuation orders, thinking the storm wouldn't hit hard. Officials say the siblings narrowly avoided tragedy. "If she had waited even 5 seconds more," a firefighter said, "we'd be telling a different story." More than 800 homes were damaged or destroyed across the 3-county region after the storm's landfall. Preliminary aerial surveys revealed entire neighborhoods with only concrete slabs remaining. Emergency services reported over 1,200 calls in the first 12 hours. Winds exceeding 130 miles per hour tore roofs from apartment buildings and scattered insulation across highways. Officials estimate it will take at least 6 months to restore power fully. "This is the worst structural damage we've seen in decades," said the regional director of emergency management. At 3 a.m., police cruisers drove slowly down residential streets, loudspeakers repeating evacuation orders in English and Spanish. Most families had already gone, but some waited too long. Volunteers knocked on doors, helped an elderly woman down the stairs, and carried a toddler wrapped in a blanket. Buses idled at the school parking lot as final groups climbed aboard. Hours later, that neighborhood was underwater. "We got out just in time," said one man, still clutching his dog. As winds intensified and their home began to shake, the Patel family abandoned their living room and climbed into the walk-in freezer at the back of their restaurant. With wind screaming outside and parts of the roof tearing away, they sat in darkness for over an hour, surrounded by bags of frozen vegetables and crates of meat. "It was the only room with no windows and a steel door," said Mrs. Patel. When they emerged, the dining area was destroyed, but the freezer was untouched. "Cold never felt so safe," joked their teenage son. A pastor live-streamed prayers throughout the hurricane using backup battery packs. Hundreds tuned in from darkened homes and flooded shelters. "It kept us connected," one viewer wrote. "I couldn't see the sky, but I could hear faith." The stream ran 14 hours without pause.
Whoa, holy moly! Oh my God! Oh man! Whoa!
No one expected the tree to survive. It had stood in the town square for over a century, and as the storm hit, people watched it bend almost to the ground. The next morning, every building around it was damaged, windows shattered, signs ripped off, but the tree still stood, stripped of leaves but upright. Someone tied a ribbon to its trunk. 2 days later, others added flowers, candles, handwritten notes. It became a quiet monument to the idea that some things, even in chaos, can hold fast. When the hurricane hit, 16-year-old Brianna lost nearly everything. Her family's home was badly damaged, and most of their belongings vanished in the wind. But 3 days later, a neighbor found her bright blue prom dress tangled in a tree 3 miles away, still intact. "It sounds silly," she said, "but it was the one thing that felt normal." Volunteers cleaned and restored it. Local businesses are now planning a community prom for displaced teens. "After everything we've lost," Brianna said, "this one dress being found made it feel like hope's still out there." A 9-year-old boy separated from his parents during evacuation was found safe at a shelter 60 miles away. Volunteers shared his photo online, and it was seen by a cousin who contacted officials. Reunification took 2 days. "He was scared, but okay," said a nurse at the shelter. Over 200 children were temporarily unaccompanied in the days following the storm. A mother and her 3 children drove nearly 400 miles over 2 days, sleeping in the car and fueling only where possible. Every hotel along the route was full. They finally found shelter in a church gymnasium converted to emergency housing. "We packed for a weekend, not for losing our home," she said. The Red Cross registered over 10,000 evacuees in the region by the end of the week. During the worst hours of the storm, volunteer firefighter Dana Price made solo trips by boat into flooded neighborhoods, rescuing 11 people, including a bedridden woman and 3 small children. With official resources overwhelmed, Price launched her own kayak from the fire station and worked through the night. "I just couldn't sit there and wait," she said. Battling wind, darkness, and floating wreckage, she pulled one family from a rooftop using bed sheets as rope. Residents are calling her a hero. "She didn't hesitate," one survivor said. "She saved us when no one else could get through." A giant inflatable gorilla, once perched above a used car lot, was spotted drifting high above rural farmland after being snatched by hurricane winds. Witnesses reported seeing the 30-foot figure tumbling through the sky, like a flying bear doing flips. It eventually landed in a tree nearly 12 miles away, startling a herd of cattle. No one was injured, but videos of the airborne mascot have gone viral. "He was our landmark," said the dealership owner. "Now he's a legend." Officials reminded business owners to deflate outdoor inflatables before storms. The morning after, children wandered the neighborhood, pointing out what had changed. "That tree wasn't broken before," one said. "That trampoline wasn't there." They turned it into a game, spot the difference, but the parents watched in silence, tallying lost cars, collapsed roofs, shredded fences. One boy found a soggy storybook in a ditch and began reading aloud, sitting cross-legged on the wet sidewalk. Others joined him. For a moment, no one remembered the night's terror, only the sound of a child's voice trying to bring a story back to life. The agricultural sector suffered heavy losses, with initial reports indicating over 60% of local crops destroyed. Grain silos crumpled like cans, and irrigation systems were twisted beyond recognition. Dozens of livestock barns collapsed, and fencing across thousands of acres was torn away. Farmers say it could take years to recover. One dairy cooperative reported 180 animals missing or dead. The State Agricultural Board is coordinating emergency aid and veterinary support in the hardest-hit rural zones. Inmates from the county jail were evacuated by armored bus, hands zip-tied, escorted by National Guard. A low-lying floodplain threatened the facility, and officials moved over 140 prisoners to a high-security unit inland. It was a quiet, tense transfer. "We've never evacuated our jail before," said the sheriff. Power was lost 2 hours later, and parts of the jail were knee-deep in water by morning. Preliminary assessments show that nearly 70% of homes and buildings in the coastal county sustained wind-related damage during the recent hurricane. Over 40 mobile homes were completely overturned, and at least 12 commercial structures lost significant portions of their roofs. Utility poles were snapped along 19 major roads, and wind gusts were measured up to 129 miles per hour in some areas. Officials noted that older buildings were disproportionately affected. Insurance teams have begun documenting losses, with early estimates in the hundreds of millions. Emergency shelters remain at capacity as debris removal continues. A canine search team located 2 missing teens in a collapsed shed behind their home. They had taken shelter there after the main house roof failed. The dog alerted to movement under debris. Rescuers dug them out with hand tools. Both were cold and bruised, but safe. "We thought no one knew we were here," said one of the teens through tears. A rescue team responding to a 911 call found an elderly man trapped in his attic by rising water. He had broken through the ceiling with a crowbar and waited for 18 hours with a flashlight and a transistor radio. They heard the tapping from the boat, he said. He was dehydrated but otherwise fine. They were angels, he said of the crew. In the rural outskirts of the county, two massive wind turbine blades snapped mid-storm, scattering fiberglass across nearby fields. Residents say the sound was like cannon fire. One farmer found a 12-foot shard embedded in his barn. It missed the cows by inches, he said. The turbines, rated for high winds, weren't meant to withstand the recorded 140 miles per hour gusts. No injuries were reported, but the incident reignited debate about wind energy infrastructure in hurricane-prone areas. Engineers have been dispatched to assess the remaining turbines for structural weakness. Following the hurricane's landfall, hundreds of birds were found lifeless across downtown rooftops and streets, apparently killed mid-flight by powerful wind bursts. Experts believe the sudden pressure changes and extreme gusts disoriented or crushed them mid-air. They had no chance, said a local wildlife official. It was like a wall of air moving at highway speeds. Residents were stunned by the eerie sight. It looked like they just fell from the sky, one woman said. Cleanup crews collected the bodies as part of post-storm recovery. Scientists call the event rare, but not unprecedented. After the storm, a cross made of driftwood was discovered lodged upright in a sand dune where dozens had sought shelter. Locals have since preserved it as a symbol. It felt like he marked the place where we were saved, said one evacuee. We'll never move it. Responders searching a flooded street found a 2-year-old girl sitting on a floating couch, soaked but alive, her arms wrapped tightly around the family dog. No adults were nearby. The home had been destroyed hours earlier, and it's believed the rising water lifted the furniture to safety. The dog, a Labrador mix, reportedly barked until rescuers approached. Both were taken to a shelter, where the girl was quickly reunited with relatives. We don't know how they survived, one firefighter said, but that dog never left her side. Authorities are calling it a small miracle amid widespread devastation. She didn't cry when the window broke or when the front door blew open. But when she saw her wedding photo floating face down in the living room, water pooling beneath it, something in her cracked. She picked it up, wiped it gently, and sat down in the middle of the chaos, holding it in her lap. "We'll be okay," she said aloud, though no one else was there. Hours later, when help arrived, she was still sitting there, calm, still, like part of the house itself. Paramedics carried a boy with cerebral palsy down 4 flights of stairs after the elevator failed and rising water threatened the building. His wheelchair was damaged, but they improvised with a rolling dolly and straps. "They didn't hesitate," said his mother. "They treated him like family." The family was later airlifted to a shelter equipped for medical needs. An estimated 12 million tons of debris now cover the affected coastal region. Everything from drywall to rooftops to boats thrown inland lies in chaotic piles across roads and lawns. Landfills are overwhelmed. Officials plan to open temporary dump sites and have called in National Guard units to assist with logistics. Cleanup costs could exceed $500 million. The storm was an hour long. The cleanup may take a year, said a federal disaster response coordinator.